Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome, everybody, to our multi-platform service for the Unitarian Church of Staten Island. We're so delighted to see you here on this lovely Easter morning. For those joining us in person, it's wonderful to have you with us, of course. You're invited to join us in the parish hall for hospitality after the service. And for those joining us online, we send special greetings to you. You are invited to join each other in a virtual coffee hour after the service. A reminder that our visiting minister, Ember Kelly, has regular office hours on Saturday from 9 until 1 p.m. To schedule a meeting, please email Ember at minister@uucsi.org. See the weekly newsletter for more information. Weekly gatherings include our women's group via Zoom. There is a change in the schedule. Starting this Tuesday, April 2nd, the women's gathering will now be held on Tuesdays from 7:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. See Kathy Santo, I don't see her in the church. See Kathy Santo for information as needed. The men of the church gather via Zoom every other Monday evening. See Tom Saluga for information as needed. Tom is also not here as far as I can see. Please support our social media outreach. Again, as co-chair of the Communications Committee, I beg you to pay attention to this. Please like and share our weekly posts on Facebook and Instagram. And remember that all of our services are on YouTube. And to find us, we have our YouTube channel. You just go to YouTube and type in Unitarian Church of Staten Island, and guess what? It pops right up. Okay. And all of our services are posted there. For those joining us in person, we gently remind you, and myself of course as well, to please silence your mobile devices at this time. And I am illustrating how it's done. So, now, let us prepare for this morning's service. The opening words by Amanda Schubert, in honor of the risk takers, those who hold the vision with clarity and charge forward with optimism, even in the face of others' doubts. You are our lamplighters and our guides. May we never forget the courage it takes to lead the way forward. In honor of the cautious skeptics, those that gather the information needed to navigate the tumultuous waters of change, you are the map makers. You are the preparers of the stores. May we appreciate your attention to the details and keep us on course. In honor of the doubters, those that may fear the changing tides of a turbulent world, you are our anchors to remind us of where we have been and where we are as a community today. May we relish your commitment to our history and your passion for who we have become. In honor of the dreamers, those that imagine what we can be to and in this world, you are the wind that blows the sails of change, pushing us ever forward. May we revel always in your whimsy and hope that dares us to never stop becoming. May the work we do together strengthen our community and our world. May we heed the call to always hold the vision of the free church ever in our sight and to work toward justice. Together, we wield a powerful spirit that is strengthened by the gifts of us all. And now, I invite you to join me in lighting our chalice. I invite you to, and you'll find the affirmation words in our order of service. So, we light this chalice in the search for truth
and the spirit of love, we unite in worship and fellowship.
As an extension of lighting our chalice, I want to take a moment of silence to light 3 candles for some of the names of those who have recently been affected by police brutality. We cannot cover all of the names who have been affected, of course. So I will light candles for the life of Rocky Dupin, for the life of Fueti Afefi, for the life Antonia M. Carter. May these lights be a symbol of our commitment to continue the work of racial justice and to proclaim that Black Lives Matter. May these lights be a symbol of our commitment to continue the work of racial justice. Oh, I already did that, okay. So, the opening hymn. Please join us in singing, not 161, Kevin will tell you there's been a change.
Right, there's been a change. Get your gray hymnal and open to the first page. Number 1. Please stand and join.
If you're visiting for the first time, please join us in singing, oh my goodness, oh, one that's up here. Start all over again. Now is the time in our service for joys and sorrows.
Good.
If you are visiting us for the first time, this is when you can introduce yourself. For those who are gathering in person, we invite you to raise your hand and then stand where you are seated and say your name. I will give you the microphone to share your joy or sorrow. We invite you to share what is in your heart. For those who are joining online, we invite you to type into the chat your joys and sorrows. Ben will then read them aloud. We invite you to share what is in your heart.
Thanks, Ruth. I'm Suzanne O'Callahan. I've been a Unitarian for 45 years and a member of this church for 30. This is my husband, John Walker. We moved to California in November, so even though you don't know us, we're online every week, haven't missed ever, but we live in California now, and we're 40 minutes north of San Diego. Anybody ever wants to come, we have a great place for you to stay on the ocean. We would love to have any of you. So we're so happy to be here live. We're doing hospitality with Mike and Maureen. This is my brother Tom. He's one of my best friends. I'm number 1 in my family. He's number 8. He was actually, so he's a visitor, and he was actually married in this church about 28 years ago or so. 31 years ago. So thank you, everybody. I'm so glad to see all of you. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I have, I think so far 2 joys. Yesterday we had a yard cleanup and just about everybody was there. I actually had to write the names down so that I wouldn't commit to memory who was there and then leave everybody out. And I think I don't believe I did. So I was joined by Sarah D, Dave, Rose, Ember, Marge, Kathy, Rebecca, Patrick, and Nancy. That was everybody? So we were here about 2 hours and we did lots of good work. There's more to be done. It's like, just throw away stuff that we really don't need. Why the heck is it there? We get so used to things being there and lying about, we don't realize they're not supposed to be there. So we really had a lot of fun. We really did have a lot of fun. And then, so there will be more. If you weren't there, don't worry, there'll be another opportunity for you. I think Diana's planning Memorial Garden, specific Memorial Garden, maybe in the middle of April, so stay tuned on that. And then my other joy is Mark and Viv have continued their triage of our sound system. And they were here yesterday, the day before, and, came down to the crackly noise was really the speaker. Originally thought it was one of the mics, this one. So Mark brought over 2 speakers, so we're trying those out. So cheers to Mark and his faithful companion, Miss Viv. We appreciate all their efforts on our behalf.
And thank you, I'll say thank you too, because one thing we don't have to worry about is you don't have to have a microphone right here in order to be heard. Is that correct? Okay.
Hello, I'm Patrick. I often come with Rebecca. My joy and sorrow is that one of my coworkers had their last day at our job this past Thursday. They have moved themselves back to Colorado, where they are from. Joy because they're off to great new work and have fun times on their own. Sorrow because now they're not here to cause nonsense with me at the work that we do. So, joy and sorrow in that regard.
Anybody else up here? No? Oh, okay. Maureen?
Morning, I'm Maureen Curran. I'm very happy to be back at church. I haven't been here for a few months because I had my knee replaced and I'm recovering. This is taking a little bit longer than I had thought it should. And I'm just happy to see you all. And I noticed when I was getting my order of service that Sally brought in this book. It's about another UU church that, well, obviously not ours, that had a search committee, and I really wanted to read it, so I snatched it right up, but I may have already read it, I'm not quite sure, but what I wanted to say in the, since I snatched it up pretty quickly, if anyone wants to read it after me, please let me know, and I will be happy to bring it back. And as I said, I may have actually already read it, I don't remember. That's what happens as you get older, you don't quite remember everything you've done. Actually, I'm not even getting older, because I remember when videotapes first came out, how often I would go to the video store and rent tapes that I had already seen. So I may have already read this book, but one way or the other, if you want to be the next one to read it, please let me know and I will be happy to bring it back for you to read. And good to see you all. Happy Easter, happy Ramadan, happy everything you may be celebrating, and happy to be alive and be here with you today.
Can you just pass the mic to? Oh, sure.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My joy is that in my quest to see as much of the world, while I still had a little bit of vision left, I just returned from New Zealand, a very beautiful country. I was there for 2 weeks. I got back last night, and I recommend it for everyone. It's great to see so much beauty, nature, and also to see, colonialism, and what it does to the indigenous people everywhere. But it was a great visit. Anyway, thanks.
Backward you go. Thank you. Okay. Ryan?
Good morning, my name is Ryan. In May, I'm concluding my junior year of college, and in August, it's going to be my final year of college, so stay tuned for that. I'll let you know what I'll be doing. And also, told Ruth that next month is Autism Awareness Month, so of course of that.
Thank you, Ryan.
Hi, my name is Alec, and my joy is that, me and my family made it here today. All right, thank you.
Okay, is that everybody?
Thank you for sharing your joys and sorrows, and for those held silently in your heart. We now pause for meditation. I will offer a quote to focus our meditation, and then ring the chime. At that point, I invite you to begin the meditation with 3 deep breaths. After a few minutes, I will ring the bell again to mark the end of our time. Today's meditation prompt by Puma Chodron is as follows. It's helpful to remind yourself that meditation is about opening and relaxing with whatever arises without picking and choosing. It says in the order of service that I will do a reading. It's not exactly a reading, it's more an address, I guess, about how we happened to choose this service and how we're connecting it to the resurrection of Jesus. You'll see that, or parts of it, on your front of your order of service. So some of this will sound familiar, but some of it, of course, couldn't be included. So, we're thinking of Jesus of Nazareth today, Easter Sunday, the day Christians around the world celebrate his resurrection. But today, we're thinking about his life as a radical pacifist, a young Jewish preacher who professed a way to follow the teaching of his older contemporary, on compassion and justice, the great rabbinical scholar Hillel the Elder. There is an apocryphal story about Hillel in which a non-Jew approached him promising to convert to Judaism if the rabbi could recite the whole of the Torah while standing on one foot. Hillel is said to have replied, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That is the whole Torah. The rest is but commentary. Go and learn it." In his preaching, Jesus promulgated the same message in this way: in everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law of the prophets. If Jesus were resurrected today, what would he think about what is going on in Gaza right now? Would he say, do to others as you would have them do to you? Would he call for ceasefire? Would he preach a new, more just way for Israelis and Palestinians to live together in peace with each other? Or on calling for peace for both sides, would he be considered an anti-Zionist? Would his fellow Jews call him an anti-Semite? And so we're asking, what is Zionism? And how can we differentiate it from anti-Semitism if we don't know what it is? Mideast scholar Ghanim Khalil joins us today to present the historical origins of Zionism and its promotion by the British Empire. Our service today is the second in a series of educational projects that we at the Unitarian Church of Staten Island are presenting to provide context and clarity to the polarized political positions on the Israel war on Gaza. To understand what is happening in Gaza today can be traced to the post-World War I British colonization of land formerly ruled by the Ottoman Empire, which was already populated by a vibrant, multicultural society. Before the Balfour Declaration of 1917, the native Jewish population of Palestine, Jews of the diaspora who had sought refuge in Palestine during the Middle Ages, they did not want a Jewish state. They valued the freedoms they enjoyed in the multicultural society in Palestine of that time. Freedom that they had been enjoying for hundreds of generations. All of this was before Balfour, before the British Mandate, before the UN partition of Palestine, giving the Zionists a state called Israel and the Palestinians a promise unfulfilled. The third project in our educational outreach will be a series of book discussions beginning with Rashid Khalidi's The 100 Years War on Palestine, which will be moderated by Ghanim Khalil. And then we will read Isabel Wilkerson's book, Cast, which will be moderated by Debbie Ann Page. For the third book, we are considering Edward Said's Culture and Imperialism. These book discussions will study liberation across the boundaries of race and nation and class. So now, it's time to take our offertory offering. Now is the time in the ordered service where we take an offering, and we know that it is the gifts of all of you that help support our ability to thrive and gather. For those attending in person, we will pass the collection plate. Please use the envelope you find in the pew, write your name, and indicate if your offering is part of a pledge or just a donation. For those online, links and instructions will be provided in the chat. You can mail us a check or donate through our PayPal giving page on our website. Please give as generously as you can. Our offerings will all be gratefully received. Thank you. And the offertory music which we will hear is Let There Be Peace on Earth.
Let there be peace. us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment bright. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
Please grab your teal hymnal and turn to number 1060, 1060, as we sing of hope and joy. Please stand. 1060.
As we sing of hope and joy today, some know only anguish and despair. How can we lift our voices in this way? But some have pain and misery to spare. If the crumbling world we would renew, we must sing no ordinary song. Peals from a noisy gong will never do. In every breath compassion must belong. Let this song our greatest hopes contain, laughter of a well-fed child its tune, broods over every heartbeat its refrain, its harmony from peaceful cities hewn. Sing of joy of hammering each nail, sing of hope while pulling every weed. So shall we sing together and prevail. May every hallelujah bear a seed.
And now, I'm happy to introduce our speaker, Khalil. Khalil is a naturalized American citizen, born in South Yorkshire, England. His parents were from Azad, Kashmir, which is in Pakistan. He immigrated to Brooklyn in 1987 at the age of 11 and became an American citizen in 1992. After he completed his active duty enlistment with the U.S. Marine Corps in 1999, followed by 2 years in active reserve, he joined the Army National Guard. In 2003, he became active in the anti-war movement and publicly spoke out against the war on Iraq, which he considered to be immoral. He was honorably discharged from the Marines on August 1999 and from the National Guard in May 2003. He is a practicing Muslim, a writer, and a longtime student of history. Ghanim.
Good morning, everybody. We'll just do a quick mic check in the back. Can you hear me? I mean, all the way in the back. Okay, good morning. As she said, my name is Khalil. I'm happy to be here. I want to thank Ruth and the church for inviting me to speak on this subject. It's a very contentious subject, and what I had to do is like what I always have to do, what everybody has to do when they're up on a podium speaking about a very complex subject. They have to reduce the amount of information that they have to fit at a certain time. So what do I have, 20 minutes? 20 minutes, okay, that was difficult when I heard that, 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do is, at first I'm going to talk about the emergence of Zionism, then I'm going to talk about the British mandate and the Balfour Declaration, and finally I'm going to end with what's called the Nakba, or the catastrophe for Palestinians. But before I do that, there's 2 points of context I want to make in order to set the scene for what I'm going to say. The first is Zionism emerged as a consequence of deeply rooted, many centuries old anti-Semitism. If you don't understand that anti-Semitism, you're not going to understand the emergence of Zionism, why Zionism was so important to so many millions of Jews. This was at an age where Europe was colonizing and sending their ships abroad to conquer other people. So at that time, there was a growth of nationalism, xenophobia, a classification of different races in a vertical way, top to bottom, who's the most civilized on top, who's the most barbaric on the bottom. So it was during this time where there was a reemergence of a new type of pogrom or anti-Semitism in violent form. I want to mention a book written by Professor Jeffrey Wiedlinger. He wrote a very interesting book called In the Midst of Civilized Europe. And one of the main things he talks about in that book is even despite the fact that it was post-Enlightenment, despite the fact that it was time of rationalism and science, and despite the fact that it was a time of civilization in European self-identity, despite those things, pogroms seemed to increase in intensity and became more organized and sophisticated. And that ended up, becoming the Holocaust, the most organized form of mass destruction of a society, of a community, of a people, ever witnessed to this day. And his book is called In the Midst of Civilized Europe. If you get a chance, you can look at YouTube channels of the professor discussing the book, or you can buy the book. That's the first context, understanding Semitism. The second context is understanding the world outside of Europe. The world outside of Europe during the late 1700s to the mid 20th century was an era of colonialism and imperialism. The same thing that I talked about in context 1. There was a lot of conquering of other lands, classifying people into different groups and civilizations and races in a vertical fashion, the most civilized being on top and the worst being on the bottom, the most barbaric. There was a time when literature about Orientalism, or the Orient was everything outside of Europe, the non-West. And so Asia, Africa, and even parts of Central and South America were considered the Orient. These are people different than us, less advanced than us, less sophisticated than us. Some of it's because of genetics, they're just, they have poor genetics. Others because we're more scientifically, rationally advanced. Whatever the case may be, that was the context of the world at the time. And that you need to understand, because in order to understand certain aspects of Zionism, you need to understand that there was this European view of the non-European world shared by Zionists and non-Zionists alike. The term Zionism is often associated with Theodor Herzl, but it was actually a term coined by an Austrian journalist named Nathan Birnbaum in 1890. He coined the term, and he was the first one to talk about political Zionism. He was a secular, middle-class fellow who later on in life converted to Orthodox Judaism, took it very seriously, the spiritual aspects of it, and then eventually became very critical of Zionism. But he was the first one to coin Zionism, not Theodor Herzl. Zionism is typically separated into three aspects, with the added fourth aspect that came after World War II. The three aspects of Zionism that scholars like to talk about are political Zionism, the one we're most familiar with, labor Zionism, that was interested mostly in the class system and the working people, who mostly at the time were poor. So they wanted to create a middle class, a rich, vibrant middle class. And finally, cultural or religious Zionism, and that was the perspective of people who took Judaism quite seriously. And if you weren't a faithful follower, cultural Zionism could also be something that is part of your culture that you practice, deeply rooted in the religion of Judaism and the experience of the Israelites, the Jewish people historically throughout. The fourth one is often called gun Zionism, because it was the combination of all three Zionisms with an addition to what was at the time felt to be necessary by Zionists is violence. So when the British let them down and the Palestinian Arabs wouldn't cooperate, violence was the means which was chosen to establish the goal of the state called Israel. Gun Zionism is talked about to a great extent by the British journalist, scholar of history, David Hirst, in his book called The Gun on the Olive Branch. It's a very detailed account of the history of how Israel came to be. Extremely detailed account. There's going to be some pauses because I have no mouse for the laptop. Therefore, I am compelled to press the down arrow key. Let's begin with Theodor Herzl. He was the first one to sort of systematically describe what he considered political Zionism, both in its theoretical aspect and how he thought it would work out practically. And so that's why he's the most famous Zionist. He's also, in Israel, he's considered the spiritual founder of Israel. He advocated the settlement of Palestine by European Jews at the expense of the Palestinians. There's a famous quote by him that says, he's talking about the Palestinian Arabs on the land. He says, we shall have to spirit the penniless population across the border while denying it any employment in our country. He also stated that we can't be we can be the vanguard of culture against barbarianism. So this is in the second context where I talked about the xenophobic view of the non-West. This is where Theodor Herzl and many of the early founders who came from Europe, early founders of Zionism, expressed the same view that European intellectuals in general had of the non-West, is that they're barbarians. So other leading Zionists, because I have 20 minutes only, I could talk a lot about Herzl. Other leading Zionists were Chaim Weizmann, who became the first president of Israel, and David Ben-Gurion, who became the first prime minister of Israel. There would have been no state of Israel without those two. Weizmann later became the first president of Israel, which is a symbolic title, but the real power was with David Ben-Gurion. During World War I and after, both represented the diplomatic and political side of the British recognized Jewish agency. So this is all before the Balfour Declaration. Political Zionism was often expressed through typical anti-Arab and anti-Muslim racist views, common in Europe at the turn of the century. Its extremist aspects, however, were realized in the form expressed by Zev Jabotinsky, who founded the later terrorist organization called the Haganah. So to David and Chaim, Jabotinsky was a thorn in their side because he would openly say certain things which later historians would consider the most honest expression of Zionism. Whereas Jabotinsky would confront the problem of, what do we do about the population that's here, the indigenous population? What do we do about them? We can't have a state because state means majority, because that's what nationalism is about, is majority, common interests, and we don't really have common interests with these people. They're different than us. We're European and they're Arabs. So at some point he realized that there's going to be an explosion of some sort or a violent move of some sort which drives them out. And this was the personal, through private correspondence and his diary entries and conversations that David Ben-Gurion had during this time with other Zionists. David also felt the same way. And Weizmann also felt the same way. They just had a different approach to it. In public, they would assure the British and they would assure their Arab neighbors, the leadership of the Arabs, that they weren't there to disrupt anything or create discord. They were going to bring advanced technology to the area, farm the land, and revitalize trade, and that would benefit everybody, the Arabs and the Jewish population. So publicly they would say that, but privately they would be confronted by this question of how do we get rid of that? The creation of the Jewish state, as envisioned by Herzl, required a majority of Jews in Palestine. I mean, that was the central, you can't have a state without having a majority. At that time, before World War II, Jews accounted for about 6% of the land. And the Arabs were, the majority. One of the main goals of Zionism, therefore, became creating what's called the relevant facts on the ground. This is used by some Israeli politicians and military leaders to this day. When you say you want to create facts on the ground, it means you want to create an environment conducive to whatever your goals are. So, Palestine, Weizmann said, is to become as Jewish as England is English. The facts on the ground consisted of three main things: massive immigration into Palestine of Jews, especially those who are skilled, a creation of a Jewish labor force and trade system, Jewish only, and finally the expulsion of Arab labor through the purchase of land from absentee Arab landlords. So at the time of the Ottoman Empire, Arab notables owned land in Syria, Lebanon, they owned land in other countries, Palestine included, but they wouldn't be there all the time. What they would do is they'd have a majority of people work the land, people who they trusted to sell whatever the land produced, and they would get a cut of whatever profit was made. They didn't necessarily stay there, because they owned lots of different types of properties all over the place. So what would happen was Jews with wealth would come in, purchase the land, and typically, historically, when Arabs purchased land from each other, or non-Arabs, they would keep the workers there because the workers' livelihood depended upon working the land. And you're talking about a society where like over half of the people, over 70% of the people were considered lower class, peasant-like. So they needed the land to live and they needed the land to work and earn and survive. But what happened with the Zionist policy was they would come in, purchase the land, and kick out all of the peasants, and they would employ only Jews. After a while, this became a major problem and led to Arab resistance, especially in 1929, and then later the bigger Arab resistance between 1936 and 1939. So that was just a prelude to before World War I and in World War I, as Jewish people are making Aliyah. Aliyah means ascension to the land of Palestine. Now I'll come to my second point, the British mandate and the Balfour Declaration. Scholars consider this declaration, this document, to be the most profound, most active in influencing and changing the course of history ever. There are other documents that are very important also, but this one's considered very central to understanding the modern world today. It's called the Balfour Declaration of 1917, authored by Lord Balfour. There were many lords back in the time, but he's notorious. It officially declared the founding of a Jewish homeland in Palestine with indifference to the indigenous population of the 94% Arabs living there. In the document itself, the words Arabs, and Palestinians does not even occur. So you're talking about a document made to resolve a conflict or to at least manage the area under the British mandate, but doesn't even mention 94% of the population. Balfour, by the way, was the guy who, his government was the one who initiated the 1905 Alien Act. That's why I called him notorious. He was also called Bloody Balfour because of his violent stance towards Irish resistance to British colonialism. But the 1905 Alien Act was the one that prevented Jews from immigrating to Britain. At the time, over 100,000 Jews were killed in pogroms all over Eastern Europe and Russia, and so it was an important thing to allow people to escape that. But Balfour his government, and he supported it, came up with the Alien Act that prevented him. The League of Nations, which came about after World War I, they were the ones who were openly advocating for every group of people to have the right to self-determination. Unfortunately, the people in the non-West took it too seriously and thought that they were included in this declaration of self-independence. Of course, most of them were colonized at the time by the British and the French, but they took it too seriously, and to their sadness, they were not included in that, in the League of Nations, goal to free everybody. So, same thing with Palestine. The League of Nations, the leaders dismissed the concern of the Palestinians and other colonized people, and were very pro-Zionist in their outlook and their practice. Upon learning about the Balfour Declaration, Edward Montagu, who opposed Zionism as the only Jewish cabinet minister in the British government, stated, and this is a quote, "When the Jews are told that Palestine is their national home, every country will immediately desire to get rid of its Jewish citizens. And you will find a population in Palestine driving out its present inhabitants, taking all the best in the country, drawn from all quarters of the globe, speaking every language on the face of the earth, and incapable of communicating with one another except by means of an interpreter." So he sort of foresaw, like Ahad Ham, another Jewish intellectual from Europe, that this was going to be a problem. The Balfour Declaration is going to be a huge issue. He continues, "I assume that it means that Mohammedans, which was the old term for Muslims, and Christians are to make way for the Jews, and the Jews should be put in all positions of preference and should be clearly associated with Palestine in the same way that England is with English or France is with the French. That the Turks and other Mohammedans or Muslims in Palestine would be regarded as foreigners, just in the same way as Jews will be hereafter be treated as foreigners in every country but Palestine." Now he makes a very important point. At this time, not everybody supported Zionism. Not every, especially religious Orthodox Jews, they weren't supporting Zionism. And there was a great deal of assimilation in Europe, despite the pogroms in East Europe and Russia. And so not every Jew felt like this was the solution for them. Jews in what's called the Orient, Iraq, Syrian Jews, Yemeni Jews, Ethiopian Jews, they certainly did not find in Zionism anything that made them feel happy or proud to be a Jew. And so they abstained from even Aliyah. It took them way after the birth of Israel to do Aliyah. But not all Jews felt the same way. And he was warning, Montagu was warning that this was going to be a problem in the future. Under the British mandate, which lasted from 1917 to 1948, the British worked with the Zionists actively to colonize Palestine. So they would allow huge quotas of Jews to come in and displace the Arabs working. They actively worked against the security interests of the Palestinians. The Palestinians would never have official representation. They would have a minority representation in the Jewish agency if they wanted to, but the minority would always be overrun by the majority. So they didn't see that as practical, obviously. This eventually led to the internal conflicts that I spoke about before, the riots in 1929 and the uprising, what's called the Arab uprising in 1936, which lasted to 1939 and was brutally put down by the British. Much of the tactics that the British used to put down that uprising as a consequence of the Balfour Declaration were tactics that were adopted by Zionists later, and Israel later. For example, I'll give you an example. We found a rifle in somebody's home. We think somebody in that home was involved in the uprising. What we're going to do is we're going to bomb the entire street to send a clear message to the other towns that even if one person in your street has some ill intent and you don't put a stop to it, you don't prevent it, you're all in danger. A lot of times they'd find out that it wasn't even the village that was involved in the actual incident that they were investigating. That street that they bombed had nothing to do with it. That entire village had nothing to do with it. It was bad intel, and they bombed the village for no reason. But that was then later adopted by other countries, including Israel. So the Balfour Declaration eventually led to these internal conflicts, and after World War II, Britain had a huge problem on their hands in terms of financing it, in terms of managing the problem, in terms of conflict resolution, and in terms of basically managing Zionism. It's important to point out that Zionists didn't control the British, like conspiracy theorists still think they do, and the British didn't control the Zionists completely. It was two separate things trying to influence each other in the most practical means as possible that also led into violence. After 1939, the British reduced the amount of immigrants, Jewish immigrants coming to Palestine, which led to the creation and the first initiation of terrorist acts by approved by the Jewish Agency, done by various terrorist groups, the Irgun, the Haganah, the Stern Gang, and other people. And so they took this as a threat to the creation of their state. So they turned to violence, and that's when the famous King David Hotel bombing happened. It was that bombing that thoroughly embarrassed Churchill and other important leaders in the British Empire, because the British were unable to respond to it appropriately militarily. They were unable to politically convince the Jewish Agency to stop it. They knew the Jewish Agency was involved, even though the Jewish Agency was denying it. And so it was very embarrassing on a global scale for the British to be unable to control a small amount of Jews with their incredible big military might, and they just won World War II. And then that's what led to my final point, the Nakba. The Nakba is generally translated as, in Arabic, to mean the catastrophe. That word does not do it justice. If you read anything about the Nakba, it's when 800,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed from their land. 300 villages were completely, wiped off the face of the earth. It did not begin with the Deir Yassin massacre, which is a famous massacre at the time, which the Red Cross investigated. The leader of the Red Cross at the time, when he investigated it, he saw massive evidence of rapes of like 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds, elderly women. One girl was ripped in half. He doesn't bother to explain how she was ripped in half, like her physical body was ripped in half. But he goes into gruesome details in other accounts of how it took him a long time him and the British interrogators, because the British sent interrogators to question them, because there's an allegation of a massacre. It took them a long time to coax and create a safe space for women to talk about their own rape at a time when we don't approach it in that way. We don't interrogate women who are raped. So they had to do that, and it's from that and eyewitness accounts and Israeli soldiers later recounting that big major massacre happened. But it's important to study that massacre to understand why later massacres also happened. There was a rationale that Zionists used. It was this or nothing. The same rationale is being used today. It's either this or it's nothing. We get nothing. We do this little thing and then we survive, or we lose everything. And so with similar justifications and that justification, they took over more than what the UN mandated for them to take over. Now, the UN partition plan at the time was done by elitists, rich people, lords, barons, sirs, presidents, prime ministers. Did not account for any of the concerns of the Palestinian people or even the other Arab people surrounding Palestine. And it gave what's now considered the richest, most fertile areas of the land to the Zionists, and the hills basically were for the Arabs, the untilled hills and everything like that, so they had to run towards the hills. So that plan was rejected by the Arabs because, first of all, it was their land. Second of all, they had no say in it from the beginning, from the first Aliyah to the last one. They didn't have any say in anything. Third, the Zionists colluded with the British and other powers to make that happen practically on the ground. Fourth, there was major massacres. Third, there was ethnic cleansing going on. Why would they agree to a partition plan that disadvantages them? So that's what led to the catastrophe called the Nakba. I hope that some of the information, I gleaned it from hundreds of sources, trying to condense it in 20 minutes. Did I go over the 20 minutes? Okay, I think I did. But I tried to do all the major points of what people talk about today. I could do a lot more. There's a lot more quotes that I could do from Zionist sources, from anti-Zionist sources. But I'll just leave it to that. The catastrophe happened, and people are paying for it to this day. Okay.
Thank you, Ghanim. And maybe you can join us at hospitality. So if anybody has any questions or would like to talk to you further, you join us. I'm sorry, it is Ramadan. So if he joins us, he won't be eating or drinking. Maybe we wouldn't do that. Maybe stay here.
No, when I was 12 when I first fasted, or 11 when I first fasted, I'd hang out in the lunchroom, and it didn't, for some reason, it didn't affect me at all.
Doesn't affect you to
No,
hang
no,
out in the
no.
lunchroom?
No,
Okay,
no.
he'll hang out in the lunchroom with us after. Thank you so much. Thanks. Okay. So, now we are prepared to our next closing hymn. Please join us in singing hymn 1026, "And Every Woman in the World," in your teal hymn.
Stand up, you need to get the blood flowing.
What number?
1026, 1026.
If every woman in the world had her mind set on freedom, if every woman in the world dreamed a sweet dream of peace, if every woman of every nation, young and old, each generation, held her hands out in the name of love, there would be no more war. If every man in the world had his mind set on freedom, if every brother stood with brother as a witness for peace, if every man of every nation, young and old, each generation, held his hands out in the name of love, there would be no more war. If every leader in the world shared a vision of freedom, if every leader in the world shared a sweet dream of peace, if every leader of every nation worked for justice and liberation, holding hands out in the name of love, there
can find the affirmation in our order of service. We extinguish this flame
without the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. For these we carry in our hearts, so we are together again.
Closing words. I send you out. I send you out now to share yourself with the world. May its promise and complexity set your mind ablaze. May you hold fast to what your life has taught you. May you question everything. And when you have changed the world, and the world has changed you, may you return again to this place and share with us what you have learned. And our final post, our postlude, Jesu, joy of man's desire.